Jon Vest is the Extension Agent for Floyd County with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. His expertise helps novice and experienced farmers produce quality livestock and crops throughout our region. Jon has offered to share his experiences with our audience and provide them with the knowledge to keep agriculture strong. This is the Ag Show with Jon Vest.
Welcome, neighbors and friends, to another episode of the Ag Show, brought to you by Citizens Telephone Cooperative and Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'd like to welcome everyone, both our TV audience as well as those that are here today in our classroom, our Floyd Education classroom. We're going to have an opportunity to learn the first components of the parts with regards to a whole series of programs we've titled Seeds to Shelf. So we invite viewers to enjoy, along with our participants here, the information that we'll pass along tonight. So once again, thank you and welcome to the Ag Show.
This episode of the Ag Show and the Seed to Shelf series is brought to you by We Insure Retirement. If you are retired or are planning to retire, visit WeInsureRetirement.com to keep the gold in your golden years.
All right, viewers, thank you. You're back with us and stuff. Like I mentioned, tonight's series or tonight's program is the first of a series called Seeds to Shelf. If you have any questions about upcoming events and activities with regards to this series, please contact the Extension office and we'll be more than glad to get you on the list and make you aware of the next meeting that you can come to. But as far as everybody here, and I'll turn my attention to our group here tonight, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out on such a beautiful day. I think some of us topped out at 73 degrees. It will be the prime example of here we are talking about trying to start seeds early. And this will be one of those important reasons when we learn or get through the end of the conversation this evening as to why we back up our actual seeding dates and go through that process at certain times. The bulk of the information this evening, you'll have the opportunity to take the paperwork back with you and refer to it in the publications and stuff. I haven't passed those out just yet, only from the standpoint of if you're going through, you might miss something that we think is an important topic or just that one point. If anybody can take home one point this evening that will make your seeding a little easier or more successful, that's what we're intending on doing or providing for you. So first and foremost, with regards to starting out with your planning and your garden planning for the year, particularly the spring of the year, most of us have done the initial fall preparations and stuff. I saw a gentleman out here tilling just down from Ingram's off of 221 earlier today. And many of us have, with the grass greening up, that grass fever, garden fever, if you want to call it that. And we start to think, where are we going to be? Or I don't want to get behind. What am I going to be planting this year? And so this particular segment is about the seed choice, timing, and the various components that go in to trying to enable us to get a seed planted early, within a given time frame, that as it develops and progresses inside, that when its transplant level or size is reached, we can move fluently right out into the garden and get on with the transplant and the rest of our season. So if I had to ask the group here with regards to seed catalogs or where you buy your seeds, what are some of the suggestions that you might have as to where you buy your seeds these days? Is it spur of the moment, like when you're walking through the big box store and there's that seed rack and you say, I'm going to hit that? You spend 20 minutes there in front of the seed rack, or are some of you taking a little more time to maybe order online? In which case, most all of your seed companies, whether it be Johnny's Seed, Gurney's, all the ones that you're most familiar with, maybe from a homeowner's perspective, it could be Cook's Garden, There's a whole gamut of different seed companies out there that once produced, seed catalogs. And we love this because as they arrived at the house, it gave us an idea that, hey, the season has begun. Sometimes we hated it because once a seed company had your name, they're sending dual magazines on the same date, same spring of the year, what have you. You were inundated with their catalogs from here on out. But as times change, and we have seen just that, many of our seed catalogs or companies are recognizing it costs thousands upon thousands of dollars to produce these fancy, colorful catalogs. So with that said, many are moving to the internet, and that is nice in that we can compare and contrast maybe some of our purchase decisions relatively easily with a flip of a screen and onto that next tab and make those decisions. When it comes to choosing seeds, however, whether you're on that internet or whether you're choosing in your seed catalog, there are some considerations that you would like to keep in mind before you ever make that purchase or hit my cart, let's pay. And in those situations, it's really look for those seed companies, and I would encourage you this, that are usually housed within the geographic region or slightly larger region from where you're currently located. Now, on a commercial sense, we are basically located in the Mid-Atlantic region, and our Mid-Atlantic seed choices from a commercial standpoint extend all the way up to the companies that are supplying out of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, areas like that. So we have a good idea with those companies just slightly north of us that most of the seed and varieties that we choose are going to be somewhat cold tolerant, and we'll talk about some of that here in just a moment. Additionally, with that cold tolerance is an understanding of our particular area and where we are in cold hardiness zones. My wife will be the first one to say, she fusses at me all the time because I tell her no. You can't plant that. It's not going to work. It's not again. But the fact of the matter is, the majority of us in Floyd County are sitting in a zone 6B at least. If we were just down the hill, down off the mountain in Roanoke or down in Stewart, we'd be back up in that comfortable zone 7, and there'd be there'd be a much larger amount of material that we could grow and extended with our growing season. That doesn't mean we can't grow it. We can grow just about anything we'd like to in Floyd County, but we have to be cautious of that spring frost or freeze that's going to occur just about like we're setting ourselves up for right now, actually, with next week's projections. I will say, if your elevation is higher than 1,800 feet in our plateaued region of Floyd and the New River Valley, there's where I consider us to start moving into that Zone 6 situation. And I say it's Zone 6B because that's not quite as cold as a Zone 6A. But for those of us in our county that are, say, in that 2,600 feet of elevation and up, and several of us fall in those areas in Black Ridge and around the Buffalo and areas like that, you can rest assured that your zone category would be a 6A. Those of you out in Copper Hill, the other cold region, as you're heading back toward Roanoke and Bent Mountain, those are our two main cold areas within the county as a whole, and they find themselves in that zone 6A much of the time too. And I love people will say, well, that doesn't correspond to the new hardiness zone maps. You know what I say to some of those maps? Phooey. If you've been here, you've experienced, and I can show you 4 out of the last 6 years where we've had a killing frost or a freeze. Last year, do you know what it was in June? June 6th, we had a killing frost here in Floyd County. So keep in mind, we're always going by a rule of thumb, and our last frost date is listed for the most part around May the 15th. I would strongly encourage anyone here, always add 7 days to whatever that last frost date is that you've read. So, and that's largely, once again, because the 4 of those 6 years, 3 of those happened on or after the 21st of May for us. So just keep that in mind as you're looking through your seed catalogs and looking at for those plant material that will do well in different locations. Most of the time, if you're below 1,800 feet or off the mountain, you're going to be zone 7. You start up 1,800 feet to 2,600 feet. You're in that wishy area that sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. And then finally, for those of us above 2,600 feet, we better know the varieties or things that we're considering planting, and we better try to operate within our planting windows. All of us usually have a particular interest in the home garden, and when it comes time from a seeding perspective, we choose all our vegetable seeds and things like that. By all means, every one of us should be choosing 1 or 2 or more flower varieties to include in the home garden from two perspectives. One, flowering plants attract pollinators. In many of our garden varieties and garden vegetables, and in case of cucumbers, for instance, it takes 7 visits to a cucumber blossom before that cucumber is fully pollinated. If we're not doing what we can to invite or increase the pollinator interest to the garden itself, they're happily over there in the neighbor's garden. So bright and colorful flowers tend to work very well. We also have those other things, other flowers like marigolds and zinnias that are very easy to grow. They may spark a younger kid's interest to be in the garden, and they may deter, in some cases, the actual furry critters that like to come and make their way into our garden. So just lots of things. Whenever I'm done with my vegetable seed selection, I always move to a flower perspective to draw pollinators. When it comes to a seed pack, many times we're often asked, or I get the question, how much do I have to plant, or how much is it? They don't put any seeds in these little packets. That's not enough to grow a garden. You'd be surprised. From the commercial perspective or the commercial industry, these packets are typically filled, and this is kind of, once again, from a commercial perspective, they try to put just enough seed in a packet that if you base your seeding spacing in your final garden location at the correct distance, you should be able to fill a 30-foot row. So that should give you the confidence when you're making just a single packet decision. I can get roughly a row or a typical homeowner's row length out of a single pack of seed. When it comes to starting our seedlings and understanding that once again we want to have a viable plant, a strong healthy plant that as we transition it out to the garden, it's ready. All that should be seamless in our timing. The only way to really understand that is to start looking at those varieties in the backs of either in the seed catalog or the back of the packets that you purchase individually, and you start going backwards from your dates. So we've already mentioned here in Floyd County, minimal date that you'd read in any magazine or internet or even the extension office, May the 15th is your last frost date. I would strongly say anything after May the 22nd is where I would start my backup from. So for instance, if my tomatoes say don't plant these seeds for 4 to 8 weeks before your last killing frost, I'm backing up roughly to mid-April, or at least the first week in April. So none of us are behind the game yet. Because of our elevation, because of our cold area, we are in the window of opportunity to start purchasing our seeds and being prepared to start our seeds indoors. And it's important for all of us to understand what type of seed we're ordering or what type of seed we're going to consider planting. When it comes to, I get lots of questions, what is hybrid, or what does hybrid mean? Basically that means that's a seed that has been developed within the breeding programs, and it has specific parents that have contributed and bred into that seed so that when it produces a plant, it is exactly what the individual producers had intended. its seed from those hybrid plants, for those of you that like to store back your seed or considering collecting the seed at the end of the season from a hybrid plant, is not true to seed. You will not get, you may get the best parent, you may get the worst parent, you may get the combination of two bad parents, it's hard to say, but you're not guaranteed that what comes up the following year is going to be the same. Heirloom simply means those seeds that have been grown typically over a 50-year period. So when we start looking or calling something heirloom, we're talking about those seeds and or plants that those varieties that we've seen and utilized in our gardens for over 50 years. When it comes to open pollinated, and it's not on this particular sheet, but there are those varieties that we'll find in garden situations. Sometimes it's corn, sometimes it's peas or beans. When I say open pollinated, they're readily pollinated by lots of different, whether it be insects, it could be wind, it could be rain, whatever made the pollination occur. But whatever that plant grows and the beans and stuff that form, or the corn that forms on that stalk or that ear, that is true usually to that plant. So in the process of collecting, and many of those open pollinated varieties as well are what we call self-fertile. They'll pollinate themselves. So in those cases, saving those type of varieties back are the ones we will be successfully maintaining that particular enjoyable vegetable for years on end. I will mention pelletized seed. When we typically think of homeowner seed that we would get that would be pelletized, it's those varieties, the lettuces and things like that, that are so small that it makes it difficult for us to handle or manipulate in our planting process. So they'll have a clay or other type of material coating on the seed simply to make them larger. In some cases, it may have other material added to there that will help in the watering or maintaining water and stuff like that around the seed. But in every case, it's largely for us to ease of planting. The treated versus untreated seeds. When you get seeds that are bright green and pink or red and things out of the seed packet, they are either treated with, some cases, insecticides to reduce the chance of those seedlings being eaten off, and or fungicides to help prevent root rot and other disease organisms that are naturally occurring in our soils from damaging the seed right off the bat. Those seeds, though, are our larger seeds. The corn, the beans, the peas, they're the ones that are going to want to, or even our melons, those are the ones that were typically best planted out in the garden anyway, and not the smaller seeds or the seeds that we would start indoors. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you see behind us, because I oftentimes get lots of questions about containers and what we should be planting in, what should be our containers of choice. I will say this, your containers of choice, and there is exceptions to every rule, but your containers of choice should always, always, always have nice, open, excellent drainage out of the bottom of the container. Now, I'm just happening to show you a couple of our different seating flats or seating with regards to our different cell trays. When we commercially are producing these, this is oftentimes what we're air seeding into or placing our seeds in, so we get ideal spacing for mechanization. But this is something fun, and that if you have access or could stop by your local greenhouse or someone that is in the larger producer, they oftentimes are throwing these things away. I would encourage you, this is an awful convenient way to start seeds for anybody here. With regards to their sizes, as you can see, they vary. This is a 288. This is a 200. We drop into 180s. And then lastly, I think this is just a 120 here. But it goes on up. It continues all the way up into 96s or into 50s. So for many of us, if we find a local greenhouse grower that's throwing these things away, and we can collect particularly the 50s or the 96s, these make excellent seed-sized, vessels for really starting plants successfully indoors. Let's talk growing mixes for a moment. Will it suffice to go out and dig up stuff from out below the barn, from the feedlot, or wherever it may be to grow seeds in? I would discourage it, and this is why. You have the tendency for all those disease organisms or all those diseases and insects that are normally present out there to now be brought into the home and or work on your seeds. Let's try, in every case when we're working at this level of starting seeds, to work with a new sterile seedling mix. That's different from potting mix. Potting mixes, we typically see the perlite or the white material in there. Our seeding mixes are more often material that will have a peat or a vermiculite or other material in there to help hold water. Seedling mixes are light, they're airy, they're sterile, so there is no disease presence, there are no insect presence. We're giving those little baby seeds, as Rona will attest to, we're giving them every little bit of care that we possibly can to make sure we're going to be successful. When it comes to growing mixes, or the actual process with the growing mix, I will always or most often have my wheelbarrow or that Rubbermaid tote, and my seed, the amount of seed or planting material that I'm going to put in there is based on what I think I'm going to fill and plant out in a given day's time. The rest of it is staying in that bale or tightly compacted in the plastic that it came from, largely to keep it, because once it starts expanding, it gets everywhere. So I'll get out my wheelbarrow, my tote, I'll peel off and peel down as much of my seedling material, my seedling mix as possible that I'm desiring to use, and out comes the spray wand or the garden hose, and I will lightly water and fluff that material that's fresh out of that bag with regards to the bale. And you'll watch it expand in front of your eyes, and before you know it, you have a wheelbarrow full of not sloppy wet. I don't want you to water it down to where it's sticky and nasty, but I just want you to water it down to it's a consistency, for lack of a better job, of cotton candy, fluff, easy, still light, but then we can pour and or apply in our containers of choice. It's important to wet the material first, because if we were to put it dry into our containers or into our pots and then try to water from the top down, it's going to suck water. Or if you plant your seeds or plants into that type of material without having pre-wetted it, you'll end up in a situation where it's drawing moisture away from our seed or our young transplant. When it comes to filling up your containers, I typically, anything like this, I'm filling up to where they're roughly 3/4 filled. I give them 2 good taps on the table or the bench that I'm working with. But if I'm using any type of container like this, I'm leaving roughly 3/4 of an inch from the top of that container as far as my initial seed, or my initial soil level. It's very easy. Grab a board, grab whatever you want to. This doesn't have to be rocket science. This should be as simple and enjoyable as possible. So you're going to rake off any excess soil. You're going to rake it out and down. If you're growing in a particular, say you're growing in a flat base, just a plastic base, or you're using any other type of plastic tray, fill it up within 3/4 of the top. Get you a nice thin board, a piece of trim that we'd have left over from the house. Most everybody's house has something that has a piece of wood laying around trim-wise. That's a wonderful, usually that 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch is an excellent straight line, and every 2 inches I'll create lines down across my given planter of choice. And then I can drop my seeds right in those lines, and these are the seeds that are typically decent in size. When I say 1/8 of an inch and smaller, that's fine, but when you start to get truly small seeds, they're the ones that I'm not going to cover up. So sometimes I'll just scatter those across the entire area and rely on not using any covering for small seed. But for anything else garden variety, I'm putting down in those slightly indented lines, I'm placing my seed, and I will add enough vermiculite over top of that row to cover my seed. Not so much that the rule of thumb is roughly no more vermiculite than twice the width of your seed. So you're not trying to cover it up with lots of vermiculite, because vermiculite holds water to the point that it can actually, too much in a mix or any mix can create root rot issues and things by holding or trapping water for extended periods of time. But seeds love water. The last thing I want to do is have a seedling that starts to wilt on me, is going back and forth because I can't control how moist I keep my soil. So the vermiculite makes a wonderful additive right off, and I basically just bring it right up over the top to where my soil is level. I will say this, I don't like to buy seedling soil and or fertilize my soil initially for seedlings. It's different for transplants, it's different for garden plants, but when I'm working for that young seedling, fertilizer is a salt, and I have to be very cautious with that seedling root as it grows out. If it contacts the salt and burns it at that point, I'm over with. If it grows out and contacts dry soil and stops its growth, if it hasn't turned and gotten into the soil in the first 2 hours, I can expect to probably lose that seed. So that's the reason for the prep work, the preparation, and getting that that medium nice and moist to begin with, so that the seed, when it puts out that first little radical or seed root, it can go right down and find its way home. When it comes to covering your seeds, people will ask me, what is the difference between perlite and vermiculite? We oftentimes see the perlite, it's the white. It's what we use to improve certain soils. If I had a garden soil or something, or I was using that to grow things in, I might add some perlite to really get that drainage and stuff that I would like to see. Vermiculite, on the other hand, is the one that looks much like an expanded, kind of like worm castings. And vermiculite, because of its ability to absorb water, does a couple different things. It also, in the watering process or later on when I am using fertilizers, particularly those liquid feeds, it will grab the calcium, it'll grab the magnesium. That's the way I cheat in greenhouse production. If you ever want a nice, beautiful, if you go in the greenhouse and you pull up this whole flat and they're beautifully green, you get home 2 weeks later and they're kind of looking a little yellow or not doing what they're doing, Jon Vest has probably played a little bit with your mind. We switched fertilizers from a calcium to a magnesium. I darkened them so green they looked wonderful, and out the door they went. If you don't maintain the fertilizer or switch back, at that point you can have some yellowing and stuff go on. So tricks of the trade as you're out there making your purchases and stuff. When you select those wonderful looking material, they are getting fed something. Initially, I don't want, however, a fertilizer charge in that seed mix. So no fertilizer is necessary. If you're buying that expensive Walmart bag, I still don't want a fertilizer charge if it can be done. If you're buying seedling media, I want to be in control of those salts in that situation.